Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Rhea, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's great to be here, finally.
Yes, thank you so much for making the time and being here. To bring us back to the very beginning, can you talk a little bit about your role as executive assistant at Ernst and Young?
Yes, well, I began my career as an executive assistant at EY in my early 20s and immediately reporting to the chairman and managing partner. So I was so young, I had no idea how to do
That's
it,
a
to be
big
very
role
honest.
even then. Yeah.
It was a big role because the EAs there were very senior. They've been with the firm for like 10, 15, 20
Oh,
years.
wow.
And I was this 24-year-old who jumped into the road fresh from outside. And yeah, but what might seem to have been like an administrative role at the time turned out to be an incredible learning journey for me. It was a growth platform for me. And I actually didn't see my job just as managing tasks, but it's more of like I approach it with curiosity and a burning desire to learn about the broader business. Maybe because I was so young and I was with the boss. So I was really trying to understand and have a sense of the business at that time. And yeah, and over time, I realized that understanding people and building trust were
Mm.
essential and key components to success in any role.
Yes. So, okay. So you kind of took this EA role, which was quite senior, and you had a lot of visibility and exposure at your company. And then how did that translate into kind of give us the highlight reel of your roles up to chief of staff?
Right. So it started as the junior role, organizing meetings, and later on, as I actually showed my stakeholder, my principal, that I am really keen to learning more and
Mhm.
taking more responsibilities. And I even remember having a conversation with him one time at the end of the day and saying, "Hey, boss, I think I'm not doing enough and I
Mhm.
think I can do more. What else can I do for you?" And he said, "Let me think about it." And that's the time that he started giving me more opportunities and more responsibilities, like organizing events, speaking with clients, organizing business leaders conferences with industry leaders, with business leaders, and hosting cocktails together with him. So it evolved over the past 4.5 years at the firm. So I think that crucial thing there is that you open up yourself to opportunities, and so that your stakeholders can actually see that.
You asked for more. Yeah.
I asked for it.
Yeah. Very good. And then tell us a little bit about your journey in terms of the different geographies that you've both lived in and also the global companies that you've worked with. You've been, Singapore and Denmark and all these different places, which I'm just curious what that experience was like.
Well, I think you know what? Every region has its own rhythm, culture, and way
Totally.
of doing business, right? Like, for example, in Singapore, it's very fast paced environment that demands agility and efficiency, right? Well, in Denmark, it's more of like the focus is work life balance, but you also have to approach it with collaborative approach and more thoughtful
Mm,
approach. And in each place, I think I learned to listen deeply to the people around me and adapt accordingly. And and I think that's a key to recognizing that adaptability is one of the key things in terms of navigating different markets. Because in every market, there are different hat to wear.
yeah.
For example, being a chief of staff in LA would mean helping the founder developing products, creating supplements, talking to manufacturers. That's being chief of staff in LA. But being chief of staff, for example, now in Denmark with potential project, It's really his supporting the founder and pushing for the client development strategies together with him. So different markets, different bosses,
Mhm.
different initiatives. And that's why adaptability is very, very, very important.
And it sounds like different, like pace you mentioned, but also just prioritization, not like at the company we have
Mm.
these priorities, but just culturally there's different priorities and different emphases in different places you go. And you kind of have to learn that, what environment you're
That is
operating in. Yeah.
That is exactly correct. And you can't really choose what you want to do because every company has their own priorities. It's different industries. And one thing to note is that it's a different industry in LA. It's an e-commerce business, for example. The one that I have now is a learning and leadership and development
Mm,
firm that is actually supporting leaders globally. So very different market and industries.
yeah.
And that's why learning and adaptability and building trust are very key competencies that will help someone to push for a chief of staff role.
Yes, and you alluded to it just there, but just to make it clear for the listeners, you've been chief of staff for a very small company and then chief of staff for a larger company, yes?
That is correct.
Okay.
And there's so much difference in how we operate in different types of companies like that.
What types of differences did you pick up on right away where you're like, "Okay, this is a different round, different version of chief of staff?"
Sure, in larger corporations, you have the structure and a lot of resources to move big projects forward. But it can also be more challenging to drive change quickly because it's so big. While in smaller companies, I realized that agility and close knit collaboration are key to actually be successful in it.
Mm,
But you have to be prepared in wearing multiple hats
mm,
and rolling up your sleeves because you will do a lot more things in smaller companies.
mhm.
And I think that's okay because that's when you learn more and more and more
Yeah.
and become diverse in your skill set.
Mhm. And you've mentioned skill set and your love for learning, and I can hear you just talking through, when I was EA, I really got the most out of that role. I really was intentional about learning and growing and even asking for more, and I'm sure you did that in your subsequent roles as well. And I'm wondering, you mentioned adaptability. Are there other and building trust, are there other key skills that you had to build into your portfolio, so to speak, that were key and instrumental in getting you to the next role in your career?
I think I was lucky enough that after my stint at Ernst and Young, I was able to transition into client development and external
Mm,
relations at McKinsey. So that helped me a lot and built my two essential factors in being a chief of staff is, being able to strategize for clients, building the business, and of course, communicating what the business is about. So, and I didn't learn that upfront. I had to learn it on the job, right? So, like, for example, dealing with media, managing relationships
um,
with them, it's very critical, right? I manage media for specifically for the Philippines at McKinsey, but I also supported them in the Southeast Asia priorities. So it's really like what's happening in Malaysia, what's happening in Thailand, what's
um,
happening in Singapore. And I think those two critical skill sets helped me become a better chief of staff when I was at the role because I kind of know how to leverage that to support my principal and
yes.
stakeholder.
Very cool. Okay. And then one of the things that you talk about is the emotional part of being chief of staff. So we can talk about the
Mhm.
skill sets and we can talk about the different initiatives that we work on, but underlying that is a human being. And humans have, fear, uncertainty. They're like, did I do that right? All those different kind of emotions. And that's part of it. I mean, that's part of being a good chief of staff and honestly being good at any role you're in is understanding that side of it. And you've been really intentional about that piece as well. So maybe just talk a little bit about your experience with what came up for you as chief of staff, and how you manage that.
Yeah, well, Actually, there are days when uncertainty can feel super
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yep.
Because you have planned for your day and it's not going to happen the way you planned it, right? And the unknown is a constant companion in being a chief of staff. But I learned that you can't shy away from it. You have to face that maybe tomorrow, the way I planned it will be totally different, right? And I think I managed the emotional toll by focusing on what I can control.
Mhm.
Like, for example, my relationships with my stakeholders, my team, being transparent in my communication, how I treat people. Not everyone is nice in the company, right? We deal with bad bosses, bad managers, bad colleagues, but we don't want to be like them, right? We have to be, I think I tried my best to be as human as possible and as kind as possible
Mhm.
while pushing for the business priorities and other priorities of the stakeholders.
So
It's
it
difficult.
is, and I wanna dig into that because I run into that. I've spoken with so many chiefs of staff and also principals who are dealing with, like, "Look, we've got some strong personalities, and they're really good
Mhm.
at what they do, but people are clunking heads together." And it's just what you said. It's like, how can I be as human as possible and also respectful, but also we gotta push this stuff forward. We can't just hold still. We gotta make something happen. So there's that dance or balance, and how do you actually do that? Can you maybe describe, if you've had some, like, tactics or tips or tricks where, "Okay, when I do have this situation, here's what I actually try."
I think what the important thing and what I learned from communication is that you learn how to say it nicely,
Yes.
right? And, and it plays a big factor for me, at least. Like, you don't have to be too harsh in your email, for
Mhm.
example, and or when you're speaking to a
Sure.
colleague when you need something. But I think communication plays a big role in being a chief of staff on how to make communication clear, sending the right message,
Mhm.
being able to communicate the objectives, why it's needed, right?
Yeah.
And again, fostering good relationships
Yeah.
with supporters. Not everyone is your supporter, but if you have supporters, if you can push it by yourself, then supporters will help you manage that.
Mm.
And I think it plays a big role in terms of pushing priorities for chief of staff because it's difficult. There are a lot of people that you deal with, a lot of units that you work with, a lot of projects to be done right. And yeah, and that's why I think it's important to have advocates and some coalition within the firm who
Mhm.
supports you and respects you, to be able to help you with delivering with projects and
Yeah.
priorities.
I think that's a really important piece, and you've been at multiple places, as chief of staff, again, like, very different environments,
Mhm.
culturally with location and company size, and I'm wondering, how did you go about building that coalition of supporters and allies within those companies? Because I'm guessing that, well, maybe some of it was the same, but maybe the tactics and approach had to be different at,
Mhm.
both those places. So just kinda talk through, how do you build a team of supporters around you?
I actually don't have a secret, but I think it's showing them that you're human,
Mm,
showing them that sometimes I don't have the answers, right? Because people trust people who are vulnerable. And I think it's
mm,
also important to show them that you are human, that you are
mhm.
kind, that you're respectful, that you deliver on your promise. And when you
Yes.
say, for example, to finance, hey, Ria, can you submit this report on this date? And you deliver that,
Mhm.
right? And you make sure that you are attentive to their needs as well. You make people feel important as well
Yes.
at whatever levels. So I think that's one thing.
Yes, and that's also a balance too. Well, I mean, I've run into this as chief of staff where, look, I'm dealing with the C-suite executive, not my principal, but another member of the executive team. We have to move forward on this, and we have someone who's blocking that and is resistant to
Mm.
change and all of this. And sometimes you have to prop them up, and stroke their ego, for lack of better words, and say like, yes, like you are important, like, yes, you add so much value in this way, and we need you to do this, this, and this, and there's a balance.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would kind of play that card, and sometimes it
Mhm.
was kind of like, I gotta push someone, I gotta actually nudge someone, give them a soft
That's
punch
right.
out because we have to move this way. So there's these different scenarios, and I think as chief of staff, you have to be able to identify, okay, what is called for in this
Mm,
situation. Um, there's so many factors, but one that's coming to mind is, are you a brand new chief of staff? Because your approach will be different than if
mm,
you've been there for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and you're speaking
mm.
to someone who just got there. So like those dynamics come into play. But I think you're right. Sometimes it is very much make them feel important, make them feel special and needed, and all for like driving things forward.
Yeah, I think it's essential. We're all human being.
Yeah.
People have ego, and you have to be able to learn to play that field, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, remembering that, you have to be kind in the
Yeah.
workplace. I think it's important. I always believe in that
Yeah.
because there are chief of staff who are harsh, and I don't believe in being harsh.
Yeah.
I believe in being kind. I believe in being respectful. Um, and things will move for sure. Things will move. You have supporters, you have advocates. Things will move for sure.
Yeah. There's what was I thinking of? Well, lots of people say, "Oh, when you're kind, you're weak and you're soft."
I know.
No. Yeah, and it's not that. It's not. I don't want people to confuse being kind with being a pushover, because that's not what we're talking about. There's like a quiet confidence and like even quiet charisma where like I am so competent and so good at what I do and so sure
Mhm.
of the value that I bring, that I can be
Mhm.
kind to you all day long. I can give you respect all day long. We can disagree, but I can still be kind about that, and that moves things forward. So I forget the quote that I'm thinking of, but when you said that, I was like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, it's not soft or weak. It's like this quiet, just nope. I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I know what I bring to the table, and I'm able to interact with you at that level.
That is so true.
So, talk to me a little bit about, like, the uncertainty piece, because this will happen as chief of
Mhm.
staff, like, it's guaranteed to happen where you're like, that was not the plan, and now we're doing this, and I have to figure it out on the fly." And you mentioned paying attention to things in your control, but is there anything else where, your day has gotten thrown off course, or even a major initiative where I've been working on that for like 3 months, and now we're deviating to this thing over here where it's uncertain what the go forward plan is. Are there any other tactics or strategies that you would suggest?
I think one important thing is you have to be open, right? Because if you're so rigid into
Yeah.
what you expect to happen, then you'll get frustrated all the time. That's not what a chief of staff role is, right? You have to be quick witted as well and plan for B or C or D
Yeah.
options because there's no plan B only. It could be C, D, E, F, G, right? Because there can so many things can happen in a day or
Yeah.
even an hour. Your principal can change his mind and say, "Oh, I'm not flying to
Mhm.
London today," but you have set up everything, right? Or you have to move around all the meetings and all the priorities or delay a project that you have been working on for the past X number of
Mhm.
months.
Yeah.
But that's part of the business. Business are not stagnant. It moves so quickly that you have to be able to adapt to it and be able to redirect your
Mhm.
priorities and accept that things happen and emotionally doesn't you don't have to be too emotionally involved with it
Yeah.
because or else it's not good for you.
It's kinda like you have to be grounded and anchored, because if you let yourself get, like, whipped around and kind of, "I'm gonna go on this roller coaster," that's so tiring, and it's so draining
That's
where, like, "Look, oh, things changed. Okay, let me adjust to that and adapt to that on the fly," which might still take a little bit of energy, but not like the energy it would take where like, "Oh, no, like, they're not flying to London, and now I gotta do this, and this is so stressful, and oh, no." It's like, you can take that and respond to that in many different ways. And I think I think the key part that you're keying into is you've got to be aware of that piece of it,
Mm,
and you have to be able to manage that piece of it and know yourself. Because it just one, it just makes it easier on you. It just feels
mm,
better when you're grounded and anchored. And believe
right.
you me, it helps everyone around you too, because they're picking up on your cues.
And just to add on that, because no one will manage it for you,
No.
because you're the chief of staff, right? Your stakeholder, your principal will not manage it for you. So, dude, you have to manage it yourself, right? That's the reality. And I think being a chief of staff makes you really a very resilient and tough person, not in a bad way,
Yeah.
because yeah, because you have to be.
Yeah.
There's no choice.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of benefits and highs in being a chief of staff. You get to build network. You get to know the business. You get to, be expert on so many things because there are so many things that you're working on. Um, and that makes you like a jack of all trades, I think.
Yeah.
But can be expert to some, right?
Yes, yes, that's a good point. I mean, I use that phrase "jack of all trades, Jill of all trades," and y generally, chiefs of staff are generalists, but sometimes they do have a specialty, and that's important to understand in the business too. So, I think that's a great call out. You mentioned some things there, but what else like, what is your favorite part, or what is one of your favorite parts about being chief of staff and the opportunity to have that sort of exposure to the whole company?
Well, I think the first thing is that I love working with my stakeholder.
Mm,
I am very lucky to have very kind and to have worked with respectable founders throughout my chief of staff roles, and I learned a lot from them. And it's also leveraging the opportunity that while I am with them, I am learning a lot from them.
mm,
I always take that opportunity. I think innately that's who I am. But for someone who wants this role, you have to be that,
yeah,
because it's a continuous learning where you're in the role, because you get to be exposed to so many things and do so many things together with your principal, right? So
yeah. Interesting. So on that learning theme, if you're speaking to someone, if someone's listening and they're like an EA or a somewhat junior role, any junior role at a company, and they are wanting to eventually become a chief of staff or something more senior, and they're like, "How do I do that?" I think the you said an innate, but the intentional and being deliberate about learning, and even if that's just observing and watching your principal or watching the colleagues and how do people interact with each other, or even learning about parts of the business or inner workings of internal processes. I mean, you've just soaked that up in anything you're doing, and I think that it's been to your benefit over time.
Mhm.
And so maybe talk to someone who's like just starting out and in the junior level, like, how do I do that? Like, what should I pay attention to? What would you say to that person?
I'd like to start that I never dreamed of being a chief of staff. I didn't know that when I was young. I took communication arts, and I was hoping, yeah, I was hoping to be someone in the production of a TV station or writing for
Oh.
a newspaper, right? Or being a columnist, maybe, but not really a chief of staff.
Mm,
But I think when you are learning and you have that passion and burning desire to learn,
mhm,
whether you are in a CA role or in a totally different role, you can be a chief of staff as long as you equip yourself with the skill set that is needed and the mindset that is needed in being a chief of staff. And again, I'll go back to the relationship building. It's so, so, so important in being a chief of staff, because you need to have network. You need to be able to speak with people at different levels. Can you speak with a manufacturer? Can you speak with a CEO or a CLO, right? Or a vice president? So that varying communication capability of being a chief of staff plays a big role as well. Plus, being able to understand people in a different lenses and perspective.
mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that. And I think, when I'm talking to younger people, I say, go raise your hand for the special project that's not directly in your purview, but just gives you
Mm,
exposure to, oh, I don't know a lot about these teams, and this special project interacts with those teams, because you never know that network and the people you meet, how that's going to play in the future.
mm,
And it helps you learn. And so just raise your hand and take these different opportunities, just like you kind of asked for more. I think there's a part where you can sit back and wait for
mhm,
things to fall in your lap, or you can
mm,
raise your hand and go get them and go make them happen. And even if it's not directly in the path of what you think you wanna do. So it's like, like, that's a special project, but I don't like, it doesn't have anything to do with me. You don't know.
mm.
Like, you don't know what doors that might
Oh,
open. So, like, I mean, part of what I talk about is just take those opportunities and take any chance you can to learn and meet new people.
I'll give you an example of that, and it's a great, great start. When I joined McKinsey, I joined as an executive assistant following my EY stint, right? And one town hall, there's a new managing partner being introduced, and they're saying, "Oh, what can we do to rebuild the office?" I raised my hand and I just proposed, "Oh, why don't we host a roundtable, cocktails? Why don't we be a member of this industry associations? Blah, blah, blah." After 2 weeks, the manager called me and said, "Ria, can you help with client development? Support a new managing partner?" And in my head, sure, of course. And then how much of my capacity would be that? And then, of course, we discussed blah, blah, blah. In the end, I became full time client development
Ah,
plus the external relations role. And that's how I evolved. You know,
because you
sometimes
raised your hand.
because I raised my hand. That's it. I bring some ideas that they haven't done in the office, and it's something that aired. And can you lead it? And I said, sure. Know exactly what to do, but I said, sure, because you can learn on the job,
Yeah.
right?
Wow, that's an amazing
Some,
story.
yeah, some opportunities you have to find yourself.
Yeah, I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then I also tell people, especially when they're young, just out of university or out of school, and they're
Mhm,
like, "I don't know what I wanna do." And but they kind of have this inferiority complex where they're like,
mhm.
"Oh, I could never be chief of staff, or I could never be, I could never lead a team like so and so." And, um you will be amazed at how much you can do. You will be amazed at what unfolds and what comes up that you can't even think of. The paths and doors that will open that you can't even conceive of right now will transpire. And so you just need to be growing and the best version of yourself. It's cliche, but you need to make yourself the best you can in whatever you're doing, and then wait. Sometimes, not wait, but look, like deliberately look for those doors to open, because it's amazing how life will just unfold and give you those opportunities if you're ready for them.
Emily, did you dream of being a chief of staff?
No, no, not at all.
Oh, but it happened, right?
Yeah, yep. And it's funny because I have a similar story where I was at, like, mid-career, like, early to
Mm,
mid-career, and we were at a board meeting, and I had been an IC, like, a very, like, high-performing, top-performing individual contributor, and, like, the board and leadership team were talking, and they basically looked at me and were like, "Emily, you know how to build an international client management team from scratch, right?" And in my head, I was like, "No, no, I do not." But out loud, I was like, "Yes, yes, I can do that." And so I walked back to my desk and I was like, I Googled, like, how to build an international client management team, because I was like, "I don't know this," but I figured it out, and that opened
mm.
so many doors once I had done that. So, yeah, I love what you shared there. But, just any last words of inspiration for someone, if you were talking to yourself, you're, at 24, you're an EA at EY, and you're like, I don't know where my career is gonna go. I don't know what life holds. What words of advice or inspiration would you give?
Be different, be weird, be the 1%. If there are 10 EAs, be the best EA. And I always, and this is the same words I tell to my sons, that, hey, you can be a food attendant, but you can be the best food attendant. And somehow, somewhere, someone will notice it. Not everyone will like you, but someone will notice your contributions, your hard work, your character, and it will go you and will bring you a long, long, long way in your career and in life in general. And I'm just thankful to my principals who have actually given me the opportunities, which I didn't realize that are for me that time. And they just said, just face your fears and rise up to it. So
Wow.
everyone is fearing something, but just rise to it, right?
Love it. We're gonna end on that because that's a beautiful note. But Ria, thank you so much for being on and sharing. I know that a lot of listeners will hear your stories and hear your advice and inspiration, and carry that with them. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. And it's thank you for the opportunity. I think I'm the only one from the Philippines you're interviewing, but yeah, it's I feel privileged to be able to share my story here on your podcast. So thank you.
You're welcome, more than welcome. Pleasure is all mine. Thanks, Ria.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.